Hi guys, it's Talia for my vlog today on Friday the, oh my gosh, it's not on here, 15th of Kislev, 23rd of November. It's nearly Shabbat, it's like 5 p.m. and candle lighting is in an hour, but all my stuff is like cooking in the oven and I'm feeling good to go, so not too worried about that. And didn't really film anything today because I was working and I've just been getting ready for Shabbat, so thought that today I would do the Q&A that I've been collecting questions on. So I'm not sure how long this will go. I'm going to try to make it fairly short. If I don't answer a question in as much detail as you'd like, I apologize. Let me know in the comments and I can try to expand it. And if your question didn't get asked, again, I'm sorry, I'm trying to make this not too long a video. Feel free to ask more questions. Excuse me. Best place is probably in like an Instagram direct message, because sometimes I found people have asked me things like this. There's a health question in here and I'm happy to answer them like more one-on-one, but don't necessarily want to make a big video about it. But I will talk about my health in the questions anyway, but just not perhaps in as much detail as the person who asked it would have liked, but I messaged them privately on Instagram. So anyway, let's get into it. The first question is, when are you most creative? And the answer to that would be usually like in the middle of the day. I'm definitely not a morning person, so it doesn't work for me to really even try to do art before like 10:30 in the morning or 11 o'clock even. Of course, I'm a stay-at-home mum. Well, I do a little bit of work, as I just mentioned, but mostly I'm a stay-at-home mum and I look after little kids, and so I do try to like fit in pockets of art, 5-minute, 10-minute pockets of art, all whenever I can. And if that happened to be earlier, there are definitely things that I could do, like just sewing pages and stuff like that. But yeah, during the middle of the day, I find often I'm too tired at the end of the day to do much art, though I guess I am more of a night owl. I find it difficult to go to sleep, but I don't have enough energy to actually do things, so it's a useless time. I read now, so that's how I make use of that time. And actually, I suppose on this channel you may not realize that I make art, because I haven't really featured it much in my videos, but I have an Instagram account, TALIamakesart, I share my art on, and I have another YouTube channel that I'll link below or in the little thing, also called TALIamakesart, where I do art journaling. Is the main art that I make. So yes, to answer the question, mostly in the middle of the day, or in the afternoon. The second question is, what are my favorite YouTube channels that I subscribe to? And my two most favorite are The Modest Bohemian and Lulastic Hippie Shake. So they're actually completely worlds apart, but both very much align with my values. So, which actually we'll get to that as a topic later on. So, but yeah, there are plenty of others, but I just was trying to rush to do this video, to be honest, and could not search through them. But they were the two that came to mind. I 100% always watch those videos. Okay, third question says, feel free to ignore this if you'd rather keep it private, but you'd mentioned about some health concerns. What are they and how are they going? So this is the health question. And I'm just going to sort of mention this more vaguely and have messaged that person privately about, the more details if they want to know. Anyway. Okay, so basically my known health problems is that I have Hashimoto's and hypothyroidism on my thyroid. I've had that ongoing for a very long time. I had a goiter for a number of years. I've tried to record a video about this and I ended up like waffling on, but if you're particularly interested in the thyroid part of my story, I'm more than happy to share that in the hopes that it might help other people. But basically I had a goiter for like 8 or 9 years on my throat that got bigger over time, and had dealt with like various incompetent doctors, and in the end I had a hemithyroidectomy, which had half my thyroid removed. While they did the surgery, they were able to identify by inspecting the rest of my thyroid and the part that they'd removed that I definitely had Hashimoto's as well. I had an extraordinarily high antibody count of over 990, and it is like meant to be like less than 50 or something like this. It was insane. This was before I had the surgery. Anyway, so that's that stuff, and basically I have been on medication since then for my thyroid, which is ongoing, and more recently, like this year, I started to see an integrative doctor who did some different tests on my thyroid, not just the standard TSH and T4, and even further than getting a T3 reading as well. She checked reverse T3, which did cost me money, cost me $100, and in Australia all of our blood, well not all, but vast majority of your blood work and whatnot is free. But it was worth doing because that came up abnormally, and we're able to now look at how to fix that. So now I'm on a T4 medication and a T3 medication, and at this point here in November we're saying that my thyroid is good, the amount of medication that I take is accurate, and we can move past that onto other things, which are the menstrual problems that I have. I won't go into tons of detail about this because it's private, and we're just in the process of solving this. But I hope that we can come to the end of it soon. I just had to have another blood test for these sorts of problems today. It was okay. You know, you can get really good blood test people and bad blood test people. And this lady, she was okay. It didn't really hurt, but it wasn't like a really smooth one like I've had sometimes. Yeah, so that not only does that, or obviously your hormones affect a lot of things, right? And also the menstrual problems are related to spotting between my period for long periods of time and stuff like this, and that I think contributes to me feeling tired. My iron levels are fine, I just don't store iron well, and basically this, as well as very low vitamin D and low zinc and selenium, which she checked because of the reverse T3 problems. All of these sort of things, and I had a whole host of symptoms a bit earlier in the year as well, led my doctor to believe that I have like irritable bowel syndrome and intolerant to a bunch of foods. And I took it upon myself to pay to do a food intolerance test, which I'm very glad that I did, because I've cut out a whole bunch of foods and am feeling significantly better. And it's to the point now where if I just decide, you know what, stuff it, I'm gonna eat a regular pizza. I'm gonna it doesn't matter how homemade it is. It doesn't matter like I made it myself and I didn't make the cheese, but you know, like put the cheese on and whatever. I will feel really sick the next day, and that's a normal part of having a food intolerance, cutting it out, and then when you reintroduce it even slightly, you know, that can happen. So for all of that, I'm off for that. Because of the food intolerances, also dealing with the Hashimoto's, I'm on a bit of a liver protocol at the moment, liver detox protocol. And so I'm off gluten, wheat, dairy, eggs, soy, caffeine, and sugar wasn't listed. I think that's the next phase in this particular thing, Hashimoto's protocol that I'm doing. But trying to reduce my sugar, but that's difficult sometimes. And I take a whole host of supplements, including vitamin D, magnesium, selenium, zinc, calcium. I think that might be all. Anyway, I take a bunch of things. I could go into this a little bit more if this is something that you're interested in, but at the moment I'm still kind of figuring it out. But basically I have thyroid problems, food intolerances, irritable bowel syndrome, and hormone disruptions. Oh, and I have extremely high cortisol, which doesn't go down well. So I'm very stressed all the time, which stops my body converting T4 to T3, and yeah, it's a schmozzle. Okay, next question is, why did you convert to Judaism, or why did you convert to Orthodox Judaism and not Reform or Conservative? There were actually a stack of questions that were like all variations of this. Okay, this is possibly one of the hardest questions to answer, so it's difficult to really truly explain why we want to convert unless you have also had that feeling of knowing that this is just what you want to do and this just feels like the right thing. And I know, like in my personal story of coming to this place, I have rejected the idea of converting many times because I've thought, this isn't logical, this isn't practical, I'm worried about what people will think, I'm not sure like if I should do this with my kids, and all of this kind of stuff. And we just sort of got to that point where it's just like, but I just have to, I can't put it off any longer. On a more practical note though, Judaism does align well with my values, and I do, certainly the more that I learn about it, I appreciate the traditions. I am a person always in my life who values traditions, values family traditions, values like little bits and pieces that you can do to remind you of God in your day-to-day life. And Judaism has all of that, so that's great. One of the things I love about Judaism is just the way that it makes holy everyday things, like eating, like going to the bathroom, like, I don't know, parenting. These are all holy acts that you can be doing when you do them the right way, say the bracha, all of this kind of stuff. Yeah, and why did we choose Orthodox over Reform or Conservative or something else like this? Well, partly Luke has family who converted a long time ago now, extended family, and they all converted Orthodox, so I guess that definitely influenced us to a degree. And then also I just felt like it just felt like the right thing to do. Again, I know it's such a cushy answer. I'm sorry I don't have a better answer. It just seems like the right thing for our family, the right fit. When we looked at other things, it just seemed like this was the way we wanted to do it. So hopefully that's explained it, but yeah, anyway. Next question, no idea what number we're up to, is how do you stop yourself getting overwhelmed by the conversion process? My answer is basically that I'm not actually very good at this. I definitely get overwhelmed often. I'm finding I get overwhelmed less often and for shorter periods of time now that I've been practicing regular Jewish meditation, and that just helps me to be less overwhelmed generally in my life, and obviously translates to not getting overwhelmed by the conversion process either. Also, I've had a few conversations with friends lately who have, when I've explained all the things we're learning and doing and changing, they've said, oh wow, it's like you're doing a university degree. And I love that analogy because it is so much like doing a university degree. You have to dedicate time to study. You can't just do your course one time a week and hope and you'll just get by. You know, this is like constant study that you have to do when you're practicing things like kashrut or blessings and stuff like this. But also you need to sit down and you need to actually study. Like you're learning a new language, you're learning Hebrew, so you need to actually just sit down and study that. You're memorizing very long blessings. You don't have to memorize long ones. I meant to say that you are learning how to read long passages of Hebrew in the Siddur, and this takes a lot of practice to read this, not just to speak it, but to, like, it's a completely different, you know, set of letters. So you definitely need to take that time to study. Also, it's a fairly intellectual process. So it's about, there's lots of critical thinking about this. There's lots of ideas, philosophies. There's lots of, just looking at my notes. Oh, lots of learning, lots of memorizing, learning a new language. All these things are like quite intellectual things, so that's similar to university as well. And I think if you're not feeling slightly overwhelmed, that sometimes you're probably not doing it right. I think that's just part and parcel of completely changing yourself. And you know, the reality is, if you have a job, whether that be going out to work or being a homemaker, if you have a spouse, if you have kids, if you have a life and things that you like to do, this is a huge extra thing to fit in terms of learning, and then also a huge way you have to change how all those interactions are. So yeah, it's not just a simple process. There's many layers to it, and that can be overwhelming. But thinking of it in this idea of like, I'm doing a university degree makes me feel comforted, because I'm like, okay, so they are kind of hard. Like that, I remember when I went to uni, and that wasn't like all, I mean, it was a great time of life, don't get me wrong. But I did have to study, I did have to do assignments, I did have to like say, no, I can't go out tonight, I have to do this other thing. Like, and I loved what I was studying, I studied teaching, but also it was difficult at times. So I think that that's a good comfort, that I'm not the only one who, when they're in the process of converting, feels overwhelmed sometimes. Also, you know, like, God willing, it like won't take as long as a university degree, but hopefully it does make me think that like there is that end to it as well. You know, once I finish the university degree, once I finish converting, obviously I'll never finish learning, but I will be at this stage where I'm comfortable in all of the new habits and ways of living my life and the ways of thinking, that it won't be difficult throughout the time. So yes, and yeah, so that's basically that. The last question is, what's the toughest part of converting? And I think this leads on well from the last topic. One of the things that I sort of mentioned in that last bit was that, you know, you have all these other, you have your job, you have your spouse, you have your children, you have the things that you want to do, your life, and you have to incorporate Judaism. You have to re-look at all of those things, and you have to re-look at all of those things and reassess them. And so it can be difficult, say like re-looking at your relationships with your children and taking on this, you have to teach them all these new things. That's what I'm trying to get to. Is one of the toughest parts of converting is doing lessons, working that out in a practical sense in your home, internalizing it, changing the way your mind thinks about it, all while doing a lesson with your kids about it, or something, you know, some sort of lesson. No, just a second. Some sort of lesson with your children about it, and reminding them about it, encouraging them about it. They might not be as willing to take on the mitzvah as you are, and you have to work out that and work through with their personalities because they're just children, and this isn't, you know, they can't necessarily see the bigger picture, and you have to work all of that around all the things you're doing. And I find converting is like kind of fast paced. I know that you do the cycle as many times as you need to do it before you convert, and that there isn't like a deadline, but I find that it does go at a fairly fast pace, at least for children. And so that's a difficulty, is, you know, translating everything to them and encouraging them to do it. And, you know, a lot of that can happen organically. They don't have to take on all of the same things at the same time and in the same speed as we do. But, you know, there are certain changes that we're all making together. And yeah, that can be difficult. I think a lot of people think that keeping kashrut, learning how to do all of that, incorporating masses of prayers into your daily life, dressing differently, that these would be some of the hardest parts of converting, and they do have difficulties, but I think that it's the internal work that is one of the most difficult things, because it's kashrut is not like a dietary preference. I mentioned earlier in the health thing that I'm not eating dairy, not eating this, blah blah blah. Eating kashrut is nothing. It's not like that, because it's not just like a preference of, okay, well, I'm not going to eat this because I know it's not good for me anymore. It doesn't matter what the reason is. You don't eat it anymore because Hashem says that you can't, or you do things differently, and you can't, if you just think, okay, well, I'm just not going to do that because I know it's the wrong thing to do, you will end up having a slip up. I don't care about this today. I'm just going to go eat a cheeseburger and go to McDonald's and I don't care, you know, because it's just like, oh, everything's so overwhelming. But when you've made the internal change inside of you, then that's when it's, even your day of I don't care about anything anymore will still fit within these parameters because you've changed your mind around them. And that's difficult, you know, obviously that sounds difficult, right? It is difficult. But it's difficult also because those sorts of things are not the things that are necessarily taught in the conversion class. They're things that you can't teach them so much, you know, like they're things that are mentioned, that are obvious. We do very practical things. If you have questions about that, rabbis are more than happy to answer those sort of questions, of course. But it is still a personal work that you have to do within you, and that can be challenging, and I find it challenging. It's just my personal experience. So, the other difficult thing I would say is just sometimes when other values that I have don't completely align with Jewish values. So halakhically, the values that I have are fine, and I can work that with it in a halakhic sense. But the customs or the culture of Orthodox Judaism don't always necessarily align with some of the values that I hold very important to me. Often values of environmentalism, and sometimes values of like attachment parenting, and yeah, it's not a problem. It's not a real roadblock. It's just something that provides a challenge every now and again, and it is a tough part for me. So yeah, overall though, I would say I love the converting process. Thank you for so many converting questions. Obviously something that's interesting. I know that really before we were converting, I didn't really know anybody who was in the process of converting or anyone who had converted except for many years ago. So I'm happy to share our experience with you. So ends this Q&A. Thank you for sticking with this. It's been a long video, I know. If you have other questions, we might do another one in a month or something like this. So yeah, stick those questions in my Instagram DM box and see you later.